Hello everyone, I am Dr. Kalpana Maheshwari from Shri Vishwakarma Skill University. In the last videos, we talked about business communication, its different types and what role does business communication plays in an organization. The different types of communication, internal communication, external communication, vertical communication and so on. In this video, we are going to talk about the factors that influence an organization's communication. So, if in an organization the communication is happening, there are different lines of command that would make an impact on it. Then the employees who are working for the organization, what do they think about the organization? What kind of interpersonal relationship do they share with the other employees? These all factors make a lot of difference to the kind of communication that is happening in the organization. The very first aspect or the factor that might influence an organization's communication is the nature of the business. When we say the nature of the business, we need to understand what kind of services or the products the organization is into. So, let us say if it is an organization which is into insurance, now that organization would require to communicate a lot with its clients or the customers. But if it is some construction company, that might not be required to interact so much with its customers. Similarly, a financial organization, they will keep everything in writing and share everything in writing with the customer. But similarly, an automobile manufacturer company will not do so. So, the nature of the business makes a lot of difference to the kind of communication that it has with its customers or the clients. The next important thing is the organization's size and complexity. So, how much complex an organization is, whether it's everything that is being built in there or does it has to import things from outside, whether it's a small organization or is a big sized organization, a large organization rather. So, if it is a large organization, the communication also is going to be equally complex. Similarly, if we talk about the small organization, the communication there can be more of informal, but if it is an organization which is a large one, the communication there generally tend to be more of a formal communication, because the information is to be shared with a large group of people and therefore it should reach through formal channels of communication. So, the different ways can be emails or brochures or flyers or maybe letters to be shared with people. The next thing is the structure of the company. So, what structure does the company have? Does it have a very hierarchical structure? Does it has a bureaucratic structure, or is it a flat structured company? Is it a mechanistic organization or is it an organic organization? So, if the organization is a bureaucratic organization, certain levels of the hierarchy are to be followed. So, there is downward communication and very rare of upward communication. But if it is a flat structured company, let us say a startup, where generally it is a flat structure, so there is more of horizontal communication. People will interact more with each other and that too in an informal fashion. But if it is a hierarchical organization, there would be formal lines of command and accordingly the message would be shared with people at different levels. The next important thing is how geographically dispersed the organization is. If an organization is regional, or let us say all there are no franchisees, it's working just in one region, in that case the communication becomes easier because people can connect with each other, they can talk to each other, they can meet each other, there can be face to face communication. But if it is a geographically dispersed organization, there are boundaries in terms of the national borders, it becomes difficult for people to communicate because there can be time differences, there are distances, and all the meetings are going to be virtual, where it takes an extra effort for people to understand the meaning and interpreting the message. Then how culturally diverse the company is. So, if the company is made up of people from different regions, from different backgrounds, different races, different ethnic backgrounds, I would say, it is very important for the employees or the members of the organization to see that they have an inclusive environment there, where the perspective, the different cultural perspectives are taken into consideration. People don't feel alienated there, rather they consider themselves to be a part of the larger group and are able to share their valuable inputs with everyone. Then the important aspect is the organizational culture. Now, in every organization, there is a specific culture, and it is said that the culture flows from the top. So, what do the leaders think about the culture of the organization? What kind of culture do they want in the organization? Has it to be an open culture, a very transparent one, or is it to be a culture where a lot of information is hoarded at different levels, whether people are ready to share whatever is happening in the departments with their fellows, with their colleagues. So all that depends on the organization's culture. So there are certain values, there are certain stories related to the organization which are to be shared with people in the organization, so that that would help people have some pride in the organization, and that would also result in some sort of belongingness with the organization, because then they consider themselves to be a part of the organization. So the organization culture also make a lot of difference on the organization's communication. The next thing, as I mentioned, that we are going to talk about is barriers to communication. Now, barrier itself means something that hinders the progress, or some sort of obstacle in the path. Now, whatever are the hurdles in the way of communication, if the message is not being conveyed properly or not being interpreted properly by people, by the receivers, then definitely there exists some barrier to the communication. So it is important to understand what can those barriers be, so that those barriers can be removed, those hurdles can be removed, and the communication or the message can be received as is sent by the sender. Now let's take a look at what are the types of barriers, what are the different barriers that might cause a hurdle in communication. The very first is language and semantic barriers. Now when we talk about semantic or language barriers, it can relate to the different meanings of words, it can relate to the different sentence structure, it can relate to homonyms, it can be related to the entire language. So how do we understand that what these semantic barriers would be doing to the listener or to the receiver? So let's say if an organization is very technically heavy and it uses a lot of jargons in its language, but for somebody who does not come from that background, it would be very difficult for him to understand what the sender wants to convey. So it becomes all the more important to see that the language or the choice of words is such that it becomes very specific and clear to the receiver, that what is the message that the sender wants to convey. Similarly, if there are culturally diverse people in the organization, it becomes important to see that what language is being used, it should be understood to all. So somebody working in one part of the world and going to another, if the global language is not used there, it becomes very difficult for him to understand that native language. So language can become a barrier there. This is to be understood, and accordingly the choice of the words is to be made in such a way, and it's not just about the words, but it can at times be also about the pronunciation. So if we look at the word minute, minute, that can be read as minute, that can be read as minute. Now how do you pronounce that word? How do you speak that word in such a way that it becomes easier for the other person to understand that what is it that you want to convey? Then comes the different barriers that are organizational barriers. Now at times in the organization, the communication becomes difficult because of the organizational barriers. And when we say organizational barriers, there can be barriers like hierarchical barriers. So sometimes the employees at one level would not feel comfortable conveying to people that what do they feel about any project or certain ideas that are being shared. So this is due to close communication climate maybe some awe of authority, and intended or unintended distortion of message. So that is what results into when there is lot of hierarchy in the organization. As I said in the last lecture also, as I pointed, that when it is about downward communication, there can be distortion of message. So from high level, when it reaches to the lower level, at times the message is changed, or there might be addition or deletion of some information there, because people want to have that position of importance, so they might hoard the information as well. So these can be the hierarchical barriers. Along with this, people do not communicate clearly to their superiors that what do they feel about certain things, or they do not provide them with the right feedback because of the awe of authority. And at times the superiors sitting in higher positions may not like what is being said by the junior, and that might go against him. The next organizational barrier is information overload. So this is due to the amount and complexity of the messages received. So at times there is overload of information. If in a meeting, or let's say in a certain period of time, if there is too much of information that is being shared with people, that can create trouble, because human mind is not meant to store information more than an extent. So if they are overloaded with information, they would not be able to retain the important information and might miss out on certain important details, and that can be disastrous for the organization. So the communication has to be such that the amount of information that is conveyed to people is what they are able to retain. And sometimes people would try to retrieve only the information which is beneficial for them from that information. So it becomes more important for the organization, for the leaders, to see that there is no overload of information, but whatever is important, whatever is essential for the employees to keep working on their projects is conveyed to them. Then comes the physical barriers. Now the physical barriers can be in terms of time, distance, noise. So if there is some sort of distraction in terms of noise for the employees, it becomes very difficult to concentrate on something. So it has many a times been noted that in meetings or in conferences, people would come late. So once they enter the room, then it creates a lot of disturbance. So all the members are disturbed, and not only the members but also the speaker is distracted by that noise. This noise can be related to the external environment, like it can be noise of the traffic, it can be noise of the people around, it can be noise of the telephone rings, and anything that distracts the speaker from speaking, or the receiver from taking that message and interpreting it. That creates a barrier in understanding of the message. The next is time. Now time becomes an important thing, because at times inappropriate timing of message or communication creates a barrier in understanding. If the receiver is not in a mindset where he can grasp the information and it is conveyed to him, then that information is of no use. Similarly, long gap in communication. So if the information is not conveyed timely, then that also is of no use for the employee or for the organization. So there has to be a proper time of communicating with people. Somebody who's in a bad mood, if he is given some information that is not a very positive one, that also might enhance his I would say his because he is upset, so that would also lead to a barrier. And then the lack of respect towards time. So as I said, that if somebody is entering late into the meeting, that also creates a lot of disturbance and lot of misinterpretation of the information. At times it so happens that the employees, when they go to their leaders and they want to have conversation with them, because of the bad time management, there are rushed conversation. Now that rushed conversation makes the employee feel that either he is being avoided, or the leader is not interested in that talk. So that time also becomes a barrier for that communication. Then there are socio-psychological barriers. When we talk about socio-psychological barriers, these are related to the psyche of people and at the same time the social aspects around them. So, the very first is status barriers. Sometimes in the organization it is seen that people who are sitting at higher authority, they are overconfident, and the one who is a subordinate is underconfident, and he is not able to convey to the boss exactly what he wants to. So that difference in, there might be difference in people's abilities, there might be difference in the job role, the pay that they are getting. This all results into some sort of maybe superiority or inferiority complexes amongst people. So if that happens, that creates a barrier in communication. There might be situations where a senior subordinate might be reporting to a younger boss. Now, this is something that might hurt the ego of the superior, rather the senior. So, this can result into some sort of conflict, and that would result into barriers in communication. The second one can be attitudes and values. People have different values, they have different perception of things. Now these perception results into their attitude. So if I have a negative attitude towards something, I will not take any positive from there. So at times what people tend to do is that if they have a set mindset for something, they will accept the news or the information in their own stride. They will not take it according to the way it is coming to them. So if people have to understand the essence of the communication, they definitely need to work on their attitude and understand others' perception and others' values as well. The third one can be closed mindsets. So if people are coming with a closed mindset, they will never understand what the other person is saying. A very good example of this is the generation gap. So if the older generation has a closed mindset for something, they will never be ready to listen to the younger generation. This goes vice versa as well. So in organizations also this is seen when the organizations were getting into this digitalization. The older generation, the baby boomers, they were not ready to use the technology to that extent. They were not happy about it. So that is a closed mindset. Then comes the preconceived notions, which means that people have their own biases. So if somebody whom I am biased against, I will not be ready to listen to him, and even if I do, I would never be happy with what thoughts he brings to the table. So I have my own preconceived notions which are formed maybe due to some past experience, or maybe some knowledge that I've gained in my lifetime. So that preconceived notion of mine would not let me understand the opinion of the other person. This can create a lot of misunderstanding and definitely is a barrier in the communication. Then one very important thing about this is poor listening. So sometimes people, as I said, that if they have superiority complex, they would not be ready to listen to others. They have very poor listening skills, and listening is generally an avoided skill, which in communication is very important. So lack of attention can be the reason behind poor listening, or it is when people actually do not want to listen, they just want to talk, which is a very communication is just about talking. Now that's the biggest myth that I have heard. So lack of attention or poor listening skills or not paying attention to what is being said, or maybe not giving the other one attention, as in like scribbling down, writing something, talking on phone when the other person is talking. So that all is like poor listening skill, and that works as a barrier when it comes to communication. Now if all these barriers are there, how will the organization have enhanced productivity there? And therefore it becomes all the more essential to address these barriers and see that how can these be resolved, so that the organization ushers into progress rather than having minor differences, and because of those not understanding each other's perspectives, and this results into a downfall in the productivity and overall loss for the organization. So we have seen that organizations have lost millions in the form of wasted hours, or lost business, or people leaving the organization just because of ineffective communication. A recent study by Project Management Institute has said that 1 out of every 5 projects is unsuccessful because of ineffective communication. So, if the organizations do not want to lose that, those billions just because of ineffective communication, they need to work on it, and they need to resolve these issues. They need to overcome these barriers, so that there is effective communication and people are able to converse well with each other and support or assist in each other's progress. What can the organizations do about it? So, the very first thing is that the sender has to make his ideas clear in his head before communicating. If the sender himself is confused, or he is not able to convey what idea he really wants to share, which means that there is no proper choice of words, and what perplexes him is to express his thoughts in a way that the receiver is able to understand those, then the communication cannot go well. So, it becomes very important for the sender to first identify that what is it that he wants to share, then what should be the choice of words, how much direct the message can be so that it is received in a way that people are able to understand it. That is going to make communication more clear, simpler and specific. The second thing is to ensure the time of communication. The time of communication should be good enough for the receiver to understand it. So, it should be a timely communication. When required, it is to be communicated. Second is looking at the timing. So, at times it has been seen that people who are working into shifts, so for example, in hospitals where people are working into shifts, they do not get to meet each other often. And if there is a lapse in the information from doctor of one shift to another, that can be disastrous for the patient. So, they have to match their timings accordingly, and along with that, any news that is to be broken to the employees or the customers or the clients, the time of communication should be good. This might not happen, of course, in the hospitals and all, but yes, in organization this has to be taken proper care of. The third thing is using a language that the receiver can understand. So, it's not about the sender's comfort, that how he or she is talking, but it depends on the target audience to whom the message is going. So, if it is about, let's say, rural population, the message cannot be in English or German or French, but it has to be in regional language. Similarly, if the message has to reach the foreign audience, or maybe the people living in some other country, then the language to be used has to be accordingly. So, what language people can understand, accordingly the message is to be conveyed. It cannot be full of jargons, because people who are not into that trade may not understand those jargons. So, to keep the message clear and simple, the language also should be simple, specific and direct. The next thing is that you have to make your message to the point and short, which means there should be a condensed message, there should be a very clear, specific and concise message. If you keep it precise, it becomes easier for the people to understand it. The message which is not to the point might require a lot of pruning. It might require a lot of effort for from the side of the receiver to understand that how or what amount of information is important in that message. So, if we keep it to the point, very short, that becomes easier for the receiver to understand that what it is all about. The next thing is checking if the other person has understood the message, which means that there needs to be some form of feedback. If there is no feedback, if there is if the receiver is not responding in any way, then it means that the complete message has not reached him. Because if the feedback is positive, that shows that the message has reached correctly. So we need to check, as a sender we need to check with the receiver that what we wanted to convey has reached him, or he has interpreted it in his own way. So just to identify that, there needs to be some form of feedback. Taking care of the body language and tone and content of the message, that also becomes very important. So if at any point you need to congratulate someone and you say congratulations with a sad face, it shows that you are not happy with the progress of the other person. So your body language, your expression should match what you are saying. Your tone is very important. So if you are speaking in a high tone to your superior, that might bring challenges for you, mind it. So one has to be very careful about his tone when talking to superiors, to subordinates, and the content of the message should be very specific, as mentioned earlier, and it should be carefully designed, because because people have different ways of understanding things. And when it comes to body language, different gestures or expressions can be interpreted differently in different cultures. So that also has to be taken into consideration. Listen before you speak. So it's been said that God has given us 2 ears and 1 tongue so that we listen more and talk less. So it becomes all the more important that you listen actively when it comes to communication. It's not just about talking and talking, but it's also about listening. So if you listen well, you get to know that what is the expectation of the other person, how you may support and assist him or her, and accordingly you can design your conversation or you can design your message. The next important thing which is very common is not interrupting when the other person is speaking. This might distract him, this might disturb him, or this might upset him. So if he is presenting some idea of his, even if he is being repetitive, we should try not interrupting him until and unless very much required. So if when the idea completes or when the sharing is complete, then definitely you can come up with your perspective, your thoughts. The last but not the least is that make your communication judgment free, which means keeping your pride and prejudice aside, not judging people, not judging who the conveyor of the message is, but what the message is. So looking at the content of the message, what is being conveyed rather than who is conveying it, one should see that is the message important, what is the importance of the message, how can that be beneficial for the organization, and how using that the organization can flourish more and progress more. Because when the organization progresses, when the organization grows, that is the growth of all of its employees, and therefore is the importance of business communication. Thank you, everyone.